Everybody, welcome to the Team Absolution lesson, Vanguard 101. You heard Ryan talk about it, but let's get an economist perspective on player placement. Everybody, welcome to the Team Absolution video bringing you another lesson. This time, Professor Jose tackles the exact same question that Ryan tackled in the last video about player placement. Because team leagues are coming, Springfest is on its way, and you've got to be ready. So, now, as aptly coined in the last video, and the link in the description, make sure you watch that one before you watch this one, because I am going to take some premises from that lesson in order to adapt it here. Because he did a great job, but I can understand how it might be a little muddled, a little bit confused, and I'm going to try to confuse it using economics to a certain extent, game theory to a certain extent. Once again, this is simplified. I hope you guys take it as you will in the comments. Let me know if you don't understand, or if I didn't explain it well, or whatever. So, let's take his premise that you obviously will not be able to prepare for everything. That is a simple fact of life. It is a fact of card games, fact of life. You cannot prepare for every matchup you will see. Sometimes you'll see good things, sometimes you'll see bad things, sometimes you'll see medium things. But let's assume that most of the time, players will build their teams according to what they will expect. So, we'll start with the premise that Ryan was right, that players will tend to put their best player in the middle position because it is the best response. And we could talk about that another time, but let's assume that it is the best response. That players put their best player in the B position for the list of reasons that Ryan mentioned. One is the morale, two is because most other players will do it as well. So, let's assume that is the most likely setup we will see. What is your best response? Ryan gave you a good, in-depth response to that, but I'm going to give you an economist response. So, my question to you, and it's a pretty simple one. Right now we've got best A, B, C, like he had it, and team BAC, like we typically have it, where our best players in the A position, our medium players in the B position, our worst players in the C position. And that's just the way we like to keep it. Sometimes you'll see this set up as well. Team CAB, where the best person's in the C position, the best person is still in the A position, and where the medium player, the worst player is in the first position, medium player is in the B position, and best player is in the A in this position right here. You see it, it's right here, sorry. It's kind of hard to letters, numbers, I had work today. So, aside from that, so what is your best response to their player being in the middle? I will argue to you here now the only good response is to put your best player in the middle. Not only for psychological reasons that Ryan mentioned, it's a good morale booster, and you want to do that and stuff like that, because my question to you in the audience is this. Who do you want to be playing their best player when crap hits the fan? So, for example, let's say that you follow suit. You put your best player, let's say you go with our team strategy. Alright? So, let's say, what do you want to happen in the worst case scenario? Let's say your best player miswrites. Do you want your best player in a miswriting position when he's playing the best player, when he's playing the medium player, or when he's playing the worst player? The correct answer, you want him to miswrite if he's playing the best player. Because this game, if they're bringing their best, and you're bringing your best, and you're playing the same decks hypothetically, then it should all wash out to then this is just broad statement here. A 50% win, 50% loss, because if you're both playing at the same skill set with the same decks, hypothetically, if the game is balanced and excluding, trigger luck going both ways, because it's luck, you played enough games, it should be 50-50-ish. So, that's assuming both players play, but both players don't play to their perfect potential at any given game. Exhaustion is taken into account, and everything is taken into account. So, when do you want your bad player to mess up? Do you want him to mess up against the best player, against the worst player, against the medium player? You want him to, if he's going to mess up, if a mess up is going to happen, if he's going to draw a hand of all grade 3s, put it all back, draw another hand of triggers, who do you want him to be up against? You want him to be up against the best, because that way, it's like you played a different strategy but without the problems. Because let's, for example, say you went with this strategy. Let's say you just followed ABC. You put your best player in the first position, your medium player in the second position, and your worst player in the third position. Best player misrides. Your best player drops the ball. Because this strategy is usually adopted given the fact that your middle player is most likely going to lose, but you plan on your best player to beat their worst. You are guaranteeing this is going to be a plus, this is going to be a minus, and you're letting it glide on your worst player, which is a terrible strategy in my opinion. That's why we go with this one. Because sometimes to put your worst here is better. I can go into that in a second. But, so, when you go in this position, you are taking this is a loss, this is a plus, and this is a maybe neutral, depending on how far worse your worst player is compared to their middle player. That gets a little mucky, right? But, let's say, you're granted at any point in time, any of these players could misride, but you want to consider yourself your best player, your most valuable asset, your MVP. What happens when he misrides? Well, if he misrides against the worst player, he might lose. He might still win, but most likely he's going to lose because if you draw a hand of all triggers, put it all back, draw a hand of all triggers, sure you can G-assist to try to get out of it, but you're not your 2 cards down, you're 2 strides down, and once again, this is all. We're not saying that, A is God and C is trash. We're saying, like, A is God, B is a semi-God, and C is just a really good mortal. But, like, the point is, he might still lose. For example, let's say, Sanctuary Guard Dragon, Ripples. On a good day, the matchup is favored to Sanctuary Guard Dragon. This is backed up by statistics, this is backed up by the tournament reports, backed up by stuff. The matchup favors Sanctuary Guard Dragon. However, if he doesn't get the grade 3, if he doesn't get to grade 1, I don't care if he G-assists. He might not come back, barring some excusable double trigger luck, excluding 6 damage heals and all of the like. We don't know exactly how this game will end up. So, he misrides. We'll put an MR here. He misrides. This is now your minus. Your best player has just lost in a setup that needed him to win. So, this one we already is expected to lose. Now, this doesn't matter anymore. You're already expected to lose this round because of a mess up. So, let's make it go again. Now, we switch our strategies to putting our worst player in the middle. Putting our best player at the end and putting our medium player at the beginning. The same situation can happen. Because, let's say he's playing Sanctuary Guard Dragon. He's playing Shadows. Whoopsies! I know me and Shadow Paladins don't mix well. Some of you guys have better results with Shadow Paladins than I do. So, what's going to end up happening in this situation is close to the similar thing that happened in the last situation. I want to readjust the camera. So, Sanctuary Guard Dragon misrides against Shadow Paladins. Sounds like a good thing, but you can only get away with it for so long. Eventually, you're gonna. If you in the beginning, but if you don't draw a grade 1, you're done. If you don't draw a grade 2, you're definitely done. If you have the right sword meat, you're done. But the point I'm trying to say is, if something terrible happens to player A here, and he ends up losing, you've lost your best player yet again. C is already expected to lose because he's your worst player going against the best deck. Expected to lose again. So everything rides on this game, but not everything you're already expected to lose. Him losing, this is a setup usually expected for the teams with, to quote back to Jorge's video on player psychology, B and A don't tilt hard at all. C, doesn't matter. If C loses, these people are going to be affected because it's what they expected. They can still win. Typically, this strategy is used when C and B can be psychologically manipulated a lot easier. That's just a fact. And we need the morale boost of A being in the middle to keep us through the game, keep our heads focused. So, this strategy is a failure in my position, and from a game theory perspective as well, because to respond with this strategy to this setup means if things go bad, I am expected to lose. I'm already 1 game down. Why put yourself in that position unless you're guaranteed? But in a game like Vanguard, where so much can depend on the turn of a card, you really don't want to put yourself in a position and where you're already one game down. So, let's respond with the next viable strategy. Now, I've explained to you why putting A in the middle is the best. And now, let's say we respond with the BAC strategy. So, best deck versus best deck given good conditions. This is Sanctuary Guard matchup versus Sanctuary Guard matchup. That's a G. That's a G. Sanctuary Guard Dragon versus Sanctuary Guard Dragon. This game can go any way. And then once I misride, yeah, I've lost. But now these games their nature hasn't changed. Because now this is, well, granted, assuming they're playing the same decks, this is Ripples, these Shadows. And this is Shadows, be Ripples. Plus, and we win. Right? So, now we are expected to win because Shadow Paladins can beat, or they can beat us with the Shadow Paladin play, but we beat them with the Ripples play. Therefore, we win. Assuming they're playing the same deck, but you see what I'm trying to get at here, generalistically speaking. You want to look at things at their worst possible situation for your most valuable asset. So, we respond with, and we're going to get a similar outcome here, where we respond with the same exact, remember, you have to pick your strategy before you go. But let's say we respond with, we decide to go with cap strategy. And they do the same thing. So, now, your most valuable asset, trashed. He loses. But these are both mirror matches. These could go any way. So, this is a winner in my opinion. This is a winning strategy where your most asset has a mistake and fails can still include a win. So that's why most teams pick their best player in the middle position because it is the most genuine response. It is the best possible response. Because you want to think about what happens when things go wrong. Because you're hoping that things won't go wrong, but you got to be prepared for that. Just like being prepared when things go well just means you win. Now you can say, well, Jose, what if your whole team's doing bad? Well, then your whole team's doing bad. What are you going to do then? Your whole team's doing bad, your whole team's doing bad. It's kind of hard to work against that. But the point is, you focus against where do you want to be, where do you want your best player to be at when he's doing his worst. When he does his worst, when he misrides. When it's taken out of his hands, is what I mean. So, this is a more economical approach than what you heard Ryan say to a certain extent. Because it deals more with the downing position in which one is losing from the get-go. But this is how I've always tackled this problem, is where you want your best player at when he's not doing his best. And you want him playing the best because that game was a toss-up to begin with. Now, the other two you can put either way. Cab is the mirror match play, where you're betting on your skill being better than your opponent. So, this, which Ryan said is our favorite, which arguably it might be. Arguably so could Cab. I'm indifferent to either one. I let kind of Jorge decide when we get there sometimes. But as long as the best player's in the middle. This is a skill position. Assuming that, like I said, we assume that this is one of the most popular positions. The Cab position is what I call the Cab strategy, the team Cab, which is, I like to read, repetition is good for memory. Worst player in the first position, best player in the second position, medium player in the third position. The reason this is skill-based is because it's the response to theirs. You're banking on your skill being better than your opponents with the same decks, the same skill level decks, right? This one banks on the decks. Now, this goes into a different thing, a different question entirely. Ryan kind of went into team placement into a sense of just ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, which is a great way to go into it, don't get me wrong. But you have to decide early on when you're placing your team, who Are you going to do it based on the skill set of the players, or are you going to do it based on the skill sets of the decks? And to say that one is equal and the same is not true. I have seen Kagero players out of their meta win games. I'm not saying that meta doesn't have a thing to say. I'm saying that skill does sometimes. And you should be calculated that as well. I try to fuse some of the both. I think there are different types of players. I think I am not a very good control player, for example, so you don't want to throw me and the best control deck together because I'm not best suited to play it. So, what I mean by this is, so what does it mean to be the best, the middle, and the worst player? Well, you could say I want my best deck in the second position or my best player in the second position. My best player would be Braxton, and I'd put him in the middle position. The best deck, arguably, would be Vanguard. I'd put it in the second position. See the difference? It's very important. It's an important key, which is why I say this. Skill set argues this. Because this means the decks are the same. So when we go ABC, I mean decks. We go best, middle, worst, I mean skill sets. But, so this already assumes right here that the decks are matched with the best players. The best deck with the best player, the medium deck with the medium player, all suit. But to a certain extent, this is a skill set because you're assuming that you're going to be mirror matching, therefore it comes down to skill sets. You're assuming that your worst player is better than their worst player. That your best player is better than their best player. This one assumes that even if your skill set is worse, they have the better deck, so they can win. This goes into that whole Ripples, Vanguard beating Ripples most of the time. Therefore, you're assuming that even though his skill set may not be as high, he can still come out because the deck has an advantage. It's complex. It's a lot of different numbers. Ryan thinks psychologically, and he thinks based on experience. Me, I think on best responses. What is the best response to a solution? What is the best response to an action? Action, your solution, your response. So, this is the best response to me is to either answer with CAB or BAC, depending on, do you want to prepare for decks or do you want to prepare for skills? And that is entirely your choice. And like I said, you can pick, there are 6 different options of teams you can pick. You can go with any of them. And you could very well still win. But like Ryan reiterated at the end of his video, the game starts before you sit down. We've covered that probably in this video and the last 2 videos. From the art of tilting to player preference, there is so much outside of the game that can change the way the game is played. That's just the nature of, that's just nature of human interactions, is that they have an effect on how we perform. So, if you want to win, do everything in your power to make that likely. So that's why we bring you these videos, that's why we bring you this. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. It got a little more convoluted than I wanted it to, but I hope it rang a bell to you guys. If it didn't, feel free to comment, feel free to suggest lessons that you want us to do. Don't forget to like, share, comment, like. I think I said that, like twice and comment twice. Subscribe, check us out on Twitter, check us out on Facebook. We'll see you at ARG at some point, maybe. We'll see you with your team. Hopefully you take our advice. If not, maybe you'll show us a different way of thinking. We'll see you next time. You're Professor Jose. Peace.